able to speak on this call, so we'll be unmuted. So we wanted to welcome everyone to the 2017 Knowledge Translation Consortium meeting, focusing on WIOA implementation from a disability perspective. I'm Rebecca Salem, Project Director of the LEAD Center. The LEAD Center is the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities, and we're a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by National Disability Institute and funded by the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. Our mission is to advance sustainable individual and systems-level change that results in improved, competitive, integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for individuals across the spectrum of disabilities. And we're very excited about this year's Knowledge Translation Consortium call. Facilitating today are myself and Michael Morris, Executive Director of National Disability Institute and the Chair of the Policy Team for the LEAD Center. We're very grateful and excited to be joined by three national leaders in workforce development. We have Julie Squire with the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. She's the Policy Director and General Counsel. Diane Duff is Executive Director of the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. And Ron Painter is Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Workforce Boards. We ask, because we do want this to be a conversation and we have all the lines unmuted, we ask that you all mute yourself if you're not speaking and if you aren't actively engaged in the conversation. We also ask that you not put your phone on hold so we don't get whatever background music your system might provide. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Morris, who will review the agenda for today's call.
Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you all for joining us today. We're going to have, in sharing the agenda, we are going to take a roll call in a few minutes. But really the purpose of today is to hear from these three wonderful leaders at NASWA, at NAWDP, and at NAWB, National Association of State Workforce Agencies, National Association of Workforce Development Professionals, and the National Association of Workforce Boards. It's an opportunity to hear from these organizations which represent such critical components of the activities that are taking place at a local, state, and national level in the implementation of WIOA. I do, before we turn to roll call and ask Christopher Button, the Supervisor of the Workforce Systems Policy, Office of Disability Employment Policy at U.S. Department of Labor, and who is the lead for us with the LEAD Center funded by ODEP, just for all of us to lay out a context, what is this KT Consortium? Well, what it is it's once a year we have brought together federally funded training and technical assistance centers which in some way touch on the critical issues of trying to achieve better outcomes related to competitive, integrated employment for youth as well as adults with disabilities. Each of the centers that are on this call have a different facet or a focus. Of course, there are some overlaps as well. Many of us work with each other, and really what this call is about is helping identify additional opportunities for collaboration and to learn from each other about promising strategies for knowledge translation. Let me try next to do a brief roll call. There are a lot of people who have signed up, but I will try to do this in as organized and orderly a way as possible. So I'm going to start by calling out the names of different centers that had registered, and you can identify whether you're the only one from your center or there are others that are joining with you, and as well your organization or agency that is managing the center. The first center I have on my list is the National Center for Workforce Development Youth, which is a center funded by ODEP. And let me ask if Curtis Richards has joined us on this call.
I think he's still logging in.
Okay, we know he's trying to log in. Did anyone else from that center join us? Okay, we know they will be joining. The next center I have listed is the National Technical Assistance Center on Blindness and Visual Impairment. The name I have related to this center is Sophie Kershaw. Sophie, did you join? Okay, batting 1,000 so far, but I'm sure people will be joining us. The next center that I have is an ODEP-funded center, Partnerships on Employment and Accessible Technology, or known as PEAT. Did Josh join, or Jowind join?
Yeah, this is Joywind and Josh are both here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. The next center that I have, funded by Social Security, is Maximus, leading that very large effort related to Ticket to Work and employment networks and serving beneficiaries. Did Jamie Pendergast join us?
Hi, Michael. Jamie's here.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Next, I have from a OSEP-funded center, NTACT, University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and I hope I don't mispronounce your first name, Lugiana Baker. Have you joined? Not yet. Okay. Anyone else joined from that center? Okay. Next, I have several centers from AIR. The first one is the Center on Knowledge Translation for Disability and Rehabilitation Research, Center on Knowledge Translation for Employment Research. And did either Kathleen or Joanne join?
Hi, Michael. Kathleen is here. And I also see on the participant list Jasmine Park and Cindy Kai and Joanne Starks.
Oh, okay. And you're all part of that same center?
All of them work on KTDRR, and some of them work on CATER.
I got it. Okay. Thank you.
I'll let them introduce themselves, too.
Okay. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Cindy Kai. I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Hi, this is Jasmine Park.
All right. Thank you. The next center I have is the National Consumer and Consumer Support Technical Assistance Center, funded by SAMHSA. And did Rachel join us? Or anyone else from that center? No? Okay. Next, I have the Disability Employment Initiative Training and TA Team, Department of Labor. Did Laura Glenick join us?
Yes. Hi, Michael. It's Laura.
Okay. And do you have anyone else who joined with you, or just you?
I do not think so.
Okay. Thank you. The next center I have is, let's see, Job Accommodation Network. And did Ann Hirsch join?
Yes, Michael. Ann Hirsch is here.
Okay. Thank you. The next center I have, funded by RSA, is one of the tax centers on, I think JD is for job development.
Job driven.
Job driven. VR TAC? And did Katie Allen join from ICI?
I'm here. Hi.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Next, we have LEAD Center, and Rebecca is here with others. Okay. Next, I have the Pathways RTC from Portland State. Did Emily Taylor join? Okay. Next, I have from Transcend, the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center, and did Karen Goss join? Yes, was that?
I think
so. Okay. We have from EARN, one of the ODEP centers, Brett Sheets. Did Brett join?
Yes, hi, how you doing?
Okay, thanks for joining. I also have the Northeast ADA Center and part of the Diversity Partners Project. Did Wendy join or Elise join? Okay. The next I have is the RRTC on advancing employment for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Did Allison Hall join? Okay. Well, hopefully many of these folks who did sign up will be joining with us shortly. I know we have representatives from a number of federal agencies, from NIDLR, from RSA, from Department of Labor, from SAMHSA, from ODEP. I'm not going to call all the individual names, which would take quite a bit of time. So I think with that, let me turn it over to Chris Button to say a few words before we turn it over to our guest speakers.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you to our LEAD Center staff, and thank you to everyone who has joined the call today. I know that we here at ODEP are very excited about today's call with our three national leaders from NASWA, NAWDP, and NAWB. We also are really fortunate because Jennifer Sheehy, our Deputy Assistant Secretary, has been able to fit this into her schedule today, and she wanted to say a few words of welcome. So I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer. Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and thank you, Michael, and everybody who's participating today. Really think this is a valuable opportunity for us to talk with NASWA and the NAWDP and the NAWB, and sorry, I know all of your acronyms, but I know we only have an hour and a half, so we're going to keep moving, but we really need to hear from you and then make sure we are coordinated in delivering you valuable information that is helpful and that helps all of our job seekers with disabilities find successful interventions and then get good jobs. So I'm very anxious to stay and listen to the discussion and then follow up as necessary with anybody to help do what we need to do to meet the needs of our guests here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Michael, back to you. Michael, are you on mute?
Oh, so sorry. Okay. Talking here just to Rebecca. All right. Yes, we're going to hear first from Diane Duff, Executive Director of the National Association of Workforce Development Professionals. And maybe before you tell us a little bit about NAWDP, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into this job? What's some of your background? And then you can take that to sharing with us the NAWDP mission.
Sure, I'd be pleased to. And thanks so much for having me on this call. I joined NAWDP in June, so I hope you will all give me a little bit of a pass for being new as I reflect on many of the things that I'm working on for NAWDP. It probably won't be completely complete because I'm still learning an awful lot about what has been and where my board and my members would like to go. But with that, I'd just like to say that I'm thrilled to be here. I came to NAWDP after spending 11 years as the Executive Director for the Southern Governors Association, which Southern Governors have a broad portfolio of interests, but one of the things that was a recurring point of conversation was workforce development and how do we make sure that our states and our communities have the talent pools available for the businesses that we're working to attract to our states. So I've actually done a lot of project work with states on looking to the future of work and understanding business communities' needs with regards to talent pool. And that is the background that brought me here. I do have 30 years of experience in the Washington political policy conversation, about 20 of it spent in association management capacities, and another 10 in policy and general advocacy. So I was really thrilled to come to NAWDP, and we're working a lot on systems improvement and really just understanding how we can broaden our portfolio of things that support the continued development of the workforce development professional. So unless there are any questions about that, I'm happy to just jump into my brief set of slides introducing what NAWDP is working on. Are there any questions at this moment? If not, NAWDP's mission broadly is to advocate for the workforce industry and to develop the professional capacity of workforce professionals. And so a lot of that comes through our programming at our conferences, our e-learning, and our certification products. So we are really focused on providing excellence in those areas and helping our members achieve the best outcomes possible to all job seekers and the businesses that they serve. Next slide. NAWDP's history is interesting, and I'm still learning a lot about this. We trace our beginnings back to 1984 when the National Job Training Partnership was formed to help support programs that were part of the Job Training Partnership Act. And a few years later, that partnership launched something called the Partnership for Training and Employment Careers, recognizing that this field really needed to focus on professionalizing its services. So after a couple of years of that project, they decided to incorporate that organization in 1992 with an emphasis on skill building and standards. And the NJTP was, at that same time, renamed the Partnership Education Fund. And then a couple years later, PTEC was renamed NAWDP. So if you were able to follow that bouncing ball easily, then you're doing better than I am. But the bottom line is NAWDP is a 501c6 organization. The Partnership Education Fund is a 501c3. They operate jointly and share the same board of directors and staff, and so everything that we do falls under those tax identification numbers. Next slide. Right now, NAWDP's programming is focused on professional development, which is largely performed in person at conferences and workshops, professional development using online e-learning products, including webinars and webcasts. We offer certification, the Certified Workforce Development Professional. based on 9 core competencies, and we provide reporting and aggregated resources that inform our membership of program and policy developments, innovations in the industry, promising practices, research, data, and the like. Next slide. There we go. So the CWDP core competencies are currently focused on these 9 areas: business and economic development intelligence, career development, collaboration and problem solving, customer service, diversity, labor market information, communication, program implementation, and workforce development structure, policies, and programs. At this particular juncture, my board is spending a lot of time looking at the CWDP credential and specifically the competencies to figure out whether and how it would be appropriate to broaden those things so that we are reflecting the growing group of people that function in the workforce space. And so I'm sure there's going to be more information about that in the coming months, but we want to make sure that when we talk about certification in the workforce development industry, that we're clear about what exact skills we are certifying. So again, focused on program outcomes and understanding how to make the best outcome for job seekers and for businesses. Next slide, please. In addition to those core competencies, we have applied e-learning tracks, or professional development and e-learning tracks, that align with some of the more defined areas, including business services, job seeker services, youth services, management services, and then of course there's also the more general workforce professional functions. So I think that those 4 categories provide some distinct areas, but again, that is under review, and we want to make sure that we are hitting all of the special population needs the way we should. Next slide. So this is the sub-tracks: improving program outcomes, serving priority populations, strengthening career pathways, improving employer engagement is really key, and then leadership and personal development. So all of these themes really run through all of our programming, and we're spending a lot of time right now figuring out how to improve our own structures and systems so that we can make sure that the entire workforce development professional community has the resources that they need to get the best outcomes for where they're working. And I think that's maybe my last slide. Is my last slide? Oh, one more. Okay, so in that vein, I am working diligently on producing a new online presence for NAWDP. It will involve a member portal where members are going to be able to virtually connect with each other at any time. They'll be able to exchange ideas and information, access aggregated resources, and develop customized professional development plans based on the resources that we provide there. If you are not already involved directly with NAWDP, I'd encourage you to check us out as this space becomes active in January. There will be an opportunity for people to create profiles who are not members so that you can see what's going on. But again, this is a real opportunity for us to connect all of the folks that are involved in the workforce industry and really use our collective experience to improve outcomes. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Diane, this is Michael. I'm curious, how many NAWDP members are there nationwide? And and here's the second part, are they equally divided in terms of focus on youth versus focus on adults, job seekers?
So at the moment, we have about 4,000 members, and it is my goal to grow that dramatically in the coming years by improving the services that we offer. In terms of the how they stack up compared to youth versus adults versus other populations, current systems don't really allow me to track that. So let's get into this new member pool that I just referred to. We will be able to let people create their own profile, identify their areas that they're working on, and provide more consistent data about who our members are serving and just information about sorts of things in that area. So unfortunately, right now, I can't answer that question for you.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Anyone with a question before we turn to our next speaker?
Hello, everyone. This is Kirk Liu from NAWDP, and I just had a question for you, Diane. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I was just wondering how many professionals have obtained your credential? And I don't know if you can answer this. Have you seen any measured improvement in terms of performance from the people who have obtained that credential? Are they seeing better results, better outcomes with individuals, or even better performance outcomes for the staff that have that credential?
Yeah, those are all excellent questions, and questions that I hope to be able to start aggregating data about in a new database scenario. But quite frankly, because we don't have the capabilities for collection of a lot of that information, I can't really give you a sense of it. In terms of how many CWDPs have been issued, I'd have to swing back with you on that one as well, to tell you the truth. I can tell you that on a quarterly basis, we're getting somewhere around 40 or 50 applications, but we've got a period coming up where I've got 120 people looking for tips and strategies for completing their form. And a CWDP certification is good for 3 years. So if I just gave you a raw number, I don't think it would be reflective of how many individuals hold that credential. So if you'd like me to swing back with you with more specific information, I could certainly do that.
Thank you, Diane. Actually, I got your email, and I'll actually send you an email so that we can touch base. I appreciate it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Is there another question before we move on? I do see one, I think, that came through the chat box. The question is, and we're going to get to this later, how do you see your membership interacting with the many technical assistance centers, providers who are working more specifically with people with disability? And I'll answer the first part of that question, even though not intended for us at the LEAD Center, but the LEAD Center has had a very active role with your predecessor, as well as with you since you've come on board, presenting at conferences that you've been operating on a national level for, I think, every year now for about 4 years, and have really given us the opportunity, not just in breakout sessions, but also in plenary sessions, to introduce the opportunities and different strategies related to support of youth as well as adults with disabilities. And so I want to thank NAWDP for that collaboration, which has been going on now for quite a number of years. I don't know if you want to add to that at this point, or we can save it till we hear from the other speakers.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for jumping in on my behalf because, again, with a mere 5 months under my belt, I can't say that I'm necessarily the best person to answer some of these bigger historical questions. But one of the things that I've really been pushing my board towards is the creation of sort of an outline of programming so that we can really clearly state what our programming speaks to. And so in the case of the disability community, from my perspective, it makes perfect sense for us to have a line of e-learning where technical assistance providers would be able to do a webinar that we host for very specific topics and issues that are being raised in our membership. We've not had a formal structure for that ongoing throughout the years in the past, but we have made an effort to incorporate disability into our conference programming. My goal now is to broaden our offerings and make sure that we're consistently addressing the concerns of all of our different communities, including the disability community. So I encourage any of you who want to send me an email and talk more about some of the opportunities that you see as appropriate to address the disability community issues, please send me a note. Let's talk about it, because we're developing new stuff as we speak.
You know, Diane, this is Chris Button at ODEP, and I just want to say that you represent where the rubber meets the road, really, in terms of service through the workforce system to people with disabilities, to youth and adults with disabilities. And in that respect, as Michael indicated a few minutes ago, we really appreciate the partnership at ODEP because we feel that by working with you and your tentacles reaching out to all those direct line staff that are in the system, that it's really a very important connection for us in terms of getting out information about best practices, strategies for serving people with disabilities, partnerships, collaborations, et cetera. And that has been just really very essential. And so I want to just reiterate his appreciation.
Well, thank you, Chris, and I'd love to talk with you more about that because I'd really like to set up a lot of the things that we're doing to make it a two-way street communication. What are these people on the ground experiencing? What do they need help with? And I'm not sure that they always know how to tap into that, and I want to make it easier for them, and I'd like to make it easier for you as well. So let's keep talking.
Excellent. Diane, thank you so much. Let me now turn to our second presenter, Julie Squire, who is the Policy Director and General Counsel at NASWA, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. I know for so many of us on this call, we have for years worked with CSA VR and the state VR agencies, but I suspect much less of us have actually reached out and been doing things with NASWA. And Julie, I'm going to ask you the same question that I had asked Diane. How did you come to NASWA, and you know, what's some of your prior background, and how long have you been at NASWA before we turn to your slides?
Well, thank you, Michael. Thank you also, Rebecca, and good afternoon, everyone. So I have been with NASWA, I'll be coming up on 3 years. And prior to joining NASWA, back in February of 2015, I had many years with the Maryland Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, first as Unemployment Insurance Director, and then I was Director of the Division of Workforce Development there. So it was a great experience, and really this new job gives me a chance to share with states across the country really our goal of sharing best practices and driving the national workforce agenda. So my background is from a state, and now I'm really, it's a great passion of mine, helping states with resources so that they can do their jobs. And I'll talk just a little bit about NASWA because I know that, you know, a lot of the people on the call are with VR, and we do have a few state workforce agencies who are now having VR in their agency. In fact, I'm really excited. We're just starting a kind of an updated survey of our members to make sure that we know exactly what workforce programs are in their agencies, because sometimes, as a lot of you know, states are so different as far as how they're organized. And some of these workforce programs can be in 2 different state agencies. That happens actually more often than you would imagine, even with Wagner-Pfizer services and unemployment. But I just want to step back and just give a little kind of overview about NASWA. So for those of you who haven't heard of us, we are the Association of the State Workforce Agencies. So what we do is we support the state workforce agencies to accomplish their workforce goals and responsibilities. So our members are the administrators of the state agencies that work with the federal workforce programs, including WIOA, unemployment insurance, labor market information, employment services, and the Jobs for Veterans State grant. All 50 states plus the District of Columbia are members of NASWA. We have a strong policy interest in those areas, and we love to collaborate with other groups quite often, but those are really our main policy areas that I mentioned. Our history, I'll just mention a little bit about it because Diane did. NASWA's actually was founded in 1937. Our name has changed since then. In the old days, we were the Interstate Conference of Employment Security Agencies. And how it happened is that when the Social Security Act was formed, states really found that they needed to talk with one another, especially about operations, people moving from state to state, and also so that their voice could be heard in the United States Department of Labor and in Congress. So actually, you can go back to the slide before here. There we go. So we did change our name to NASWA in the year 2000 to kind of be a little bit more modern. And we have a board of directors kind of arrangement. So we have 10 board members that are selected from the workforce administrators across the country. And we also have an executive committee. And I just included this slide so you can see who the leaders of our organization are. And we are really a board-driven association. We meet regularly with the board, and it's a very active board. Our new president is Renee Olson from Nevada, and we have John Pierpont from Utah. Dale Peineke was our president last year from Washington State, Odie Donald, District of Columbia, and Kelly Schultz from Maryland. We are nonpartisan, which is great, and it's amazing how much you can agree upon in the area of workforce development, which is wonderful for our organization, and everybody agrees we just need to push this forward and work together. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we really have 2 main strategic goals at NASWA. The first is driving the national workforce agenda. And this really is to be the voice of the states collectively in Washington, D.C. At the end of the presentation, our website is up there. It's www.naswa.org. And we do have legislative priorities. Our board meets every year to update these. And it's really what we want to push both at the Department of Labor and in Congress. With this group here, I wanted to mention a new initiative that we have, and our partners who are on the line from the Department of Labor know about this, and possibly others do. We just started working with USDOL a group. It's called the WIOA Information Technology Support Center, WITSI. And what this is, it's really a convening and working together of federal partners and also state partners to look at information technology to support WIOA. The states have really needed more IT systems that can really integrate different programs, especially under WIOA, now that we have agencies that might have, for example, unemployment insurance and vocational rehabilitation and adult education. So this is a new initiative that we're really just getting off the ground, and we're very excited about that, and hopefully be able to offer advice and best practices for the state as they are really aligning their IT systems. Next slide, please. So we have at NASWA committees. So in addition to the board level, we really involve the state employees in the different policy areas. And one way we do this is to have committees. We have an unemployment insurance committee, we have a equal opportunity committee, a veterans committee, employment and training, labor market information, administration and finance, and technology committee. And what they do is really twofold, again, echoing our strategic goals. One, driving the national workforce agenda, sending forward policy goals, policy changes that need to be made. The other area that is very important for NASWA is, along with our high-value member services, it's really sharing best practices. So we have conferences, which are a great way for our members to share best practices and learn from experts and from each other. This slide here is from our Veterans Conference, which is held once a year. This here is from our conference in Washington, D.C. in August. That is Brad Snyder standing on the right. He is a veteran of the Afghanistan War, and he lost his sight in the war, and he is now in the Paralympics as a swimmer, and he's doing quite well. And in addition to this conference, if you could go to the next slide, I'll just mention a couple of our other bigger conferences. We have an annual workforce meeting, and we have an unemployment insurance meeting. These are really opportunities, again, for members to learn from each other and share best practices. And if you could go to the next slide, I wanted to mention something else that NASWA is working on that some of you might not know about. So Direct Employers is an association of employers. And about 10 years ago, after USA.jobs stopped, NASWA started working with Direct Employers on a national labor exchange, a job site, and it is under my.jobs. And this is a national labor exchange that the states can feed their jobs into this from their state job banks. And this is really the national labor exchange at this time. It's really exciting, and if you can check, if you're not familiar with it, check it out, because it does have a microsite for disability jobs. And I don't know if all of you are aware of that, but I thought it would be something to mention. Next slide, please. So we do have a big conference coming up in September. This is going to be a combined workforce development and UI conference. We're very excited about it. We don't have any information on it on our website yet, but we're working to get there. So hopefully, if our work is closely aligned with yours, you might be interested. But I'm really interested in following up with NDI and LEAD Center to find out who all is on this call and the other organizations to see how we can have further collaborations. We love collaboration. NASWA has done a lot with NAWB over the last couple of years since WIOA was passed, as Ron knows, and other organizations. Really excited about Diane joining NAWDP and collaborating with her as well. And we've had great success with the LEAD Center and with NDI, working with our members. NDI has done some, National Disabilities Institute has done some great projects with our members. And any time that we can let our members know about resources available to them, it's really beneficial. So I'm hoping that after this call, Michael and Rebecca, you might be able to share with us, the speakers, information about the different organizations so that we can think about how we can collaborate further. So that's just kind of a high level. If you go to the next slide, my information is there, including the website, www.naswa.org. Next slide, please. Oh, I guess the last slide didn't make it. It also had my email on it. So can you try going back one just to see if it's there? Nope, okay. The last slide somehow didn't make it, but my email is jsquire@naswa.org. And our website, if you want to see more of what we do, is naswa.org. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, Julie, thank you. I think what we're going to do is hold on questions right now because we want to make sure there's enough time for Ron to present, and then we also want to hear from the centers that are on. So thank you for right now, and we're going to move quickly to Ron Painter, Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Workforce Boards. And Ron, I'll ask you the same question to start. You know, what's your background? How long have you been at NAWDP? And then you can proceed with your slides.
Okay. I'm guessing you can hear me?
We can.
We can.
All right. Not always sure on the technology. Am I doing this right? Michael, thanks, and I also want to express my appreciation to LEAD for asking me to join you today. What I want to do, obviously, is introduce NAWB, but in response to your question, Michael, my life began with some brief tenure, a couple of years in the private sector. And then local elected office in Western Pennsylvania. As part of that, I got exposed to a project that I would describe as it was federal money that helped employ young people in the summer. And I moved over to head up that project and fell in love with the whole concept of skills and how people acquire skills and what it is that they do with them. How do we find and develop talent? That led me from Western Pennsylvania to a stint with the Department of Labor on loan for a project looking at how would you take the Malcolm Baldrige criteria, organizational criteria, and how would you inject that into workforce development organizations. And I stuck around DC to work for the National Alliance of Business, headed back to my home territory of Pittsburgh to work first for the mayor and then move over to the Workforce Board. And in 2009 came here to DC to head up the National Association of Workforce Boards. So it's been an interesting journey. You can hit the next slide. So the National Association of Workforce Boards was founded in 1978, and it began when a group of individuals who had been appointed to something called a private industry council, that back in that legislation was an advisory council around this federal money that came for employment and skill development. And they got together because they really didn't understand public policy well, weren't really sure how effective they could be if they didn't really understand how does all of this end up. How does it all begin at the federal level? How does it end up at the local level? What is these partnerships? How can they influence one another? And so they got together and in October of 1978 incorporated what was then the National Association of Private Industry Councils. NAPIC became NAWB when the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity, or the Workforce Investment Act came into being and workforce boards were created. The boards have, since the beginning, been a majority membership from the private sector. And that really gets to be important later on when we talk about what do I see as some of the primary drivers for WIOA. But NAWB represents, and there are about 550 local business-led workforce development boards across the U.S. and the territories. That's a very dynamic number as we see some consolidation around boards. We also see new boards being created to respond and reflect regional labor markets. We do our work through what you might think of as 4 tracks or 4 buckets. The first is advocacy. Do a lot of work here in Washington, D.C., representing the work of the boards, both on Capitol Hill with the administration, and as you notice on the left, an increasing number of national business associations and foundations whose work overlaps into workforce development in the local boards. We do it through training and technical assistance, do a lot of work with the locals around working with them, and I'm glad that the Employment and Training, ETA, DOL is joining us today because they're a great partner for us. So we do a lot of technical assistance in the field, a lot of that sometimes involving helping local workforce development boards, their staff, understand opportunities and constraints inside the legislation and the regulation, and working with DOL sometimes to better define that. We do a lot of communications with our members, and as again referring back to, we do a lot of strategic partnerships. We have a number of learning providers that work with us. We have a number of large corporations that we work with, and as you see, a list of companies to the left. Recently, we added Google.org to that list. We were very, very pleased and very proud to co-host with MIT and Google a conversation not too long ago in Cambridge around what's the future of work and how do we see the workforce development system playing in that space. NAWB is a 501c3. Our board is made up of 24 individuals that come from across the U.S. We have 2 local directors on the board. The balance are all private sector individuals who either sit on local workforce boards, chair workforce boards, or are national concerns around workforce development. So you can hit the next slide. Currently, the board is chaired by Tom Peterson from Huffman Construction in Seattle. I think when we talk about the workforce boards, both state and local, and what they're driving at, I think it's important for us to remember what eventually became the reauthorization of the federal initiative around workforce development. The Workforce Investment Act took 13 years basically to reauthorize, and when it was done, it was called the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I refer to it often as the I&O because I think if we forget that innovation and opportunity are core concepts in the Act, then I think we've really lost the intent of the discussions that led to the reauthorization. So I put the purpose up there, and the first word you notice is to better align. There's a lot of money that is pumped into employment and training across the country, both public and private dollars. So the question becomes, what are they doing? And we spent a lot of time in the reauthorization talking about workforce development as a system. It's not a program. It's a system. It's an ecosystem of a number of organizations, a number of funding subsets. But the idea is that what we want to do across the country is to create an environment, a system, an ecosystem where we can have economic gain for our regions and for the individuals who live there. We operate in a labor market, so there are enormous challenges in any kind of a market, and certainly, as you know, we have that in the workforce, in the development, in the labor market. To give you some sense, and I can't see you, so this is a little strange, but I'm going to assume that when I ask you how many of you got hired in a room, I see there's 55 people on the call. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you got hired in a room with 54 other people at the same time. Okay, I don't see any hands. So that means that you experienced getting hired primarily the way I do, which is I got hired, I got a letter, I got an email, I got a phone call. There were 50 million of those transactions in the U.S. labor market last year. So this is an enormously dynamic thing called the labor market. So part of the work of the workforce boards is to analyze what is happening in their local, in their regional labor markets, and then work to align the resources around developing skills to make it matter in their region. And there's one more slide, and that you can jump to that. We do an annual conference. It's called the Forum. It comes up the end of March. It's at the Washington Hilton. Registration's going on right now if you're interested. I know a number of folks on the phone are already join us each year. We also do something called Workforce Central, which are podcasts that you can find on iTunes or Google. And we'd really love feedback in terms of topics that would be of interest to you. We have interviewed a number of people, over the course of the last couple of years, talking about labor market information. We have my friend Richard Lum come on to talk about what the future looks like and how you build scenarios to potentially deal with the future or be prepared to deal with it. So I'd encourage you to go out and check out the podcasts and let me know what you would like, you'd like more information about or you wish that we would talk about on the podcast. So with that, Michael, I'm going to hand it back to you and hang out and listen, and if I can answer questions, I'm certainly happy to do that.
Ron, thank you so much. I'm going to skip past a question we were going to ask each of you is, what do you feel are the most significant changes that you've seen since the implementation of WIOA? We'll probably come back to it, but I want to turn to the centers that are on the call. I want to acknowledge, I think Curtis Richards was finally broke through and got onto our system. Thank you, Curtis. And I believe that Cheryl Mitchell with EFSLMP also made it onto our system, and there may be some others. But I want to turn to the centers on the call and ask if anyone would like to take the lead in terms of how is your center involved in supporting WIOA implementation. And there are obviously several that could spend hours now speaking about what they're doing, but is there, maybe try to keep answers relatively short, and is there anyone who'd like to respond to that question? And just identify yourself and your center.
Hey, Michael, this is Josh Christensen from the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology. I can speak a little bit to our overlap with the WIOA, and it won't be long because we don't have a ton there, but we have put together a guide, and this is really aimed at the AJCs to better understand their responsibility around accessibility as it relates to their programmatic and thus digital resources. So I think a lot of them are familiar with the physical space, and we're talking about accessibility in the digital space. And so on our website, we've put together some resources in the link we call Policy Matters, and I can put that in the chat window or whatever, but I'll briefly review what they are. First, we've got a great video by Bobby Silverstein, which I know many folks know, talking about, speaking really directly to the states and their responsibility. And we put together an overall guide, kind of an overview of what accessibility, what is required under WIOA for the American Job Centers. And then within that, we have a few very tangible, concrete resources for people to use. We've got kind of the 5 top things that they need to know. We have a checklist that the job centers can go and kind of look at what they have and go down the checklist to help them. We even have put together a presentation deck, like a PowerPoint, that someone at an American Job Center could use for their own learning or to share with their staff. You know, or some people that manage multiple AJCs could share to understand what it is around accessibility they need to do and improve as it relates to WIOA. And I'll stop there and just saying that a lot of what is required, we also have resources on generically on our site as we have tools and resources free to everyone around accessible workplace technology.
Great, thank you. I think the least I can do is call on you, Curtis, since we made it so hard for you to get online. You really have 2 centers, one RSA funded, the other ODEP funded. Probably have more than that for all I know, but you want to just give a few examples of your supporting WIOA implementation.
So a couple of things. Thank you, Michael. First of all, we through particularly the ODEP-supported NC, National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, have presented at all 3 of your conferences over the years many times. And also, Diane, and this is something that we have mentioned when we met you last week that we want to chat about, is our youth service core competencies that we developed became the basis of your youth endorsement at one point. I know you've been going through some revisions, so we need to just sort of catch up on that. We've developed a series of training modules based on those youth service core competencies that we are now delivering. We've delivered them all to the VR system in Alaska. This is under the Youth VR TA Center that the Department of Ed is supporting. Folks are just hungry for how to work better with youth, how to train their counselors to work better with youth. So we've now done all 8 trainings in Alaska. We've done 4 trainings in Nevada. We're about to move into Arizona. And then we've also been supporting the VR system in 6 or 8 states where we are delivering customized employment training so that the VR folks understand how to implement customized employment. And given the time, I'll just drop it at that, and feel free to check in with folks.
Thank you, Curtis.
But this is Cindy Kai from the KTDR Center. We also develop a webcast series to support VR professionals to implement WIOA. As a matter of fact, Curtis is one of our speakers on those webcast series. So we encourage folks to check it out, our ktdr.org website. And what we do is to develop, identify a group of a research, a panel. So we have researchers, we have VR professionals to represent on each of the webcasts, so to translate the best practices to support evidence-based VR practices. So we also been working on a new webcast. Actually, it's going to be live in collaboration with the Workforce Innovation Technical Assistance Center. It's called the Career Pathways, a roadmap for innovation and integration. And this live training is going to be on December 12th at 12 p.m. Pacific time, so I encourage folks to check it out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call on Laura Glenick. I want to make sure people are aware of Workforce GPS and other, quick highlights from the DEI training and TA.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. And hello, everyone. Workforce GPS, for those who don't know, is the web portal for WIOA, for workforce professionals. It is literally workforcegps.org. The NDI DEI Technical Assistance Team helps to host and maintain 2 websites on this web portal. One is Disability and Employment, Community of Practices. Workforce GPS lays out websites either as community of practice or collection sites. We also have a Disability Employment Initiative collection site. But for all of those on this line, really would point you to the Disability and Employment Community of Practice, because it's been developed really to serve as the medium through the regular workforce channel to provide access to current resources, information, and tools around disability and employment. We're actually in the process of revamping it. I think it would be helpful. And just to say, Michael, also, the Disability Employment Initiative, for those who don't know, is a jointly funded project with ODEP, also, and administered by the Employment and Training Administration at Department of Labor. And with WIOA and the emphasis around disability, it really provided a platform in the states and local areas where DEI exists. They were and currently are leveraging DEI to really address the disability provisions in WIOA. So it's really been an exciting opportunity for the technical assistance team to see this happen. And we hear from project leads that they think that the DEI is a blueprint for WIOA. So it's been a very exciting time. And I'll also put in the chat the websites that I just referenced.
Great, thank you. Do we have others who want to share some of your work that would be relevant today?
Yeah, hey Michael, this is Barry Whaley from Southeast ADA.
Hi,
Can
Barry.
you hear me?
We can.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. What we've been doing over the last year at Southeast ADA, we've been developing a curriculum, a youth and self-advocacy curriculum that touches on each of the 5 pre-ETS components: job exploration, work-based learning, trying to remember them all now, readiness, self-advocacy, counseling, post-secondary counseling. And what we have done is we've developed what right now is an 8-module training curriculum that includes both PowerPoint presentation and interactive activities. It's a very content-rich curriculum that has a lot of different activities based upon individual learning styles for a broad range of disability groups. Currently, we are piloting this curriculum in cooperation with Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation. We also are looking to pilot the curriculum next year at South Carolina School for the Deaf and Blind. I just think it has a lot of opportunity to reach out to students to provide some basic information on how to advocate for yourself, what to do on the job, how do you ask for an accommodation on the job. So it's something that we're very proud of.
Thank you, Barry. Is there another center?
Hello, Michael. Michael, this is Kirk, and I just wanted to throw something out to Barry. Barry, what you're doing sounds really exciting. We wanted to make sure that we're coordinating with you, and we know that there are efforts around those same topics around pre-ed. So we would love to talk to you and make sure that all those efforts are coordinated and we're talking the same language, and to make sure that whatever resources you have that we can share with those other entities so we're actually consistent. So if it's possible, I would like to reach out to you and start to facilitate that discussion.
Yes, that'd be great. I'd love to have that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, and it's Barry. What's your last name, Barry?
Whaley.
It's Whaley, W-H-A-L-E-Y. And let me give you an email address. It's pretty simple. It's BAWHALEY at law.syr.edu.
Okay.
Thank you, Barry.
Is there another center who'd like to share? Okay, Rebecca, I think you're going to share a little bit from the LEAD Center.
Yeah, I was going to mention that for those of you who aren't aware, the LEAD Center has been involved with all three of the organizations that presented today, but we're doing a number of things. We're working to promote the equal opportunity provisions of WIOA, having been part of creating the Disability Reference Guide and are doing technical assistance and training in different parts of the country. We'll be launching with the Civil Rights Center and ODEP and ETA a community of practice on equal opportunity. We've been piloting guided group discovery in American Job Centers with partners to provide an alternative form of assessment and a way to introduce customized employment for people who are experiencing barriers to employment, including people who have, the most significant disabilities. And we have on our website a number of documents that look at WIOA from a disability perspective, looking at different aspects of WIOA so that you could cull out those things that are most relevant in working with people with disabilities with suggestions. Also on our website, there's a link to the DRIVE site, which was created with ODEP, where you can get a state-by-state analysis of what's happening in each state in terms of disability employment with very rich data and information on what's happening related to WIOA implementation, including a place that has pulled out the pieces in every state's WIOA state plan that relate to services to people with disabilities and career pathways work related to people with disabilities. So it's a link on our website, and I encourage you to all look at that as well.
Okay. Any other center that would like to share?
Michael, this is Ann Hirsch from the Job Accommodation Network. I just wanted to quickly mention a couple.
Great.
We developed a training module on our website called Bridging the Gap Across Transition. It's geared to helping people understand how and when and if to disclose and request an accommodation. As well as we do a lot of referral on our one-on-one consultations to ODEP pubs and the youth team pubs and documents that Richard was mentioning.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, I'm going to take the question now back to Julie, Diane, and Ron that I just wanted to make sure that we got to hear from many of the centers about relevant work that they're doing that might be of benefit to each of your organizations. Maybe Ron, I'll start with you. What do you think are some of the most significant changes that you've seen since the implementation of WIOA?
Thanks, Michael. I think we have a slide that'll pop up there, I think. I think when we talk about the federal engagement in workforce, I think Julie mentioned this earlier, you think about the 1930s, but even before that, in the 1850s, business came to to Washington to say, and no offense, ladies, but business came to say the boys that were coming from the farm did not understand how to, what was modern, what was manufacturing, and how to be a part of it. And so we created land-grant universities, and their charge was to, help people transition from agriculture and also to improve agriculture, but to transition into modern manufacturing. So to me, that really started the notion of this was about the individual. Like, how do we, in some ways, how do we fix the individual? But WIOA, as I mentioned earlier, we started to talk about systems and systems theory in the reauthorization of WIOA. And so when you look at what the purpose is, it makes this, to me, very, very, very significant psychological shift in that we think about the original land grants, we think about the 1930s, the Work Progress Administration getting people to work, Social Security, unemployment. We think about Lyndon Johnson's call in the 1960s and the war on poverty. And we think about all of those as social, social ventures. And now you come to WIOA where it starts to talk about talent and talent development as an economic tool and as a means for a region to differentiate itself. So as we face global competition, talent now becomes an economic, a great and critical economic asset. The boards have traditionally, when I mentioned the private industry councils, it was all about partnerships. It was all about like how many people are at the table and are we all inclusive? And not to say that that's not the focus today. It still is this outreach, this convening of the interest in a community, but it's also the board taking a position of leadership. How do you align these resources? How do you indicate what are industry sectors that are critical in a region? What are the occupations that are critical? What are the skills? How do we develop those skills in our region? And finally, I think WIOA starts to focus the boards, and again, not necessarily away from the job seeker, because obviously they're critical in talent development. You wouldn't have any talent development if you had nobody to develop. But it's really about how do you engage with business in a much more intense way. So moving away from transaction, moving away from just the job listing, to how do you begin to develop very deep partnerships with business around talent development, and what is their role? How do you work with the PK through 12 system? We have a lot of workforce boards that are working closely with early childhood. We have a lot of boards that work very closely with Carl Perkins, career and tech education. So I think the shift that WIOA says to workforce boards, again, that a majority of their members are from the private sector, is, hey, you're going to have to lead this conversation around talent development in your region. So I think when I talk to business groups and they tell me I don't know how to connect, I don't know how to work with them, I always start off by saying, guys, this is a business proposition, because WIOA funding is based on that region continuing to produce outcomes. How many people entered employment? What were their wages? How long did they stay in the labor market? You know, how many industry recognized credentials are you generating? So this really does become much more for the board, much more of a metric conversation, a business conversation, if you will. So I think that's the major shift, and I hear it constantly as I travel the country. People who thought WIOA or the INO was just a warmed over WIA have now discovered that it is a huge shift in how we see this federal investment.
Thank you, Ron, and that certainly puts in perspective major, I think, no question, major differences between WIA and WIOA. Julie, you know, from the perspective of state agencies, WIOA had major references throughout to support individuals with disabilities and others with multiple barriers to employment. We've worked with your EO committee on Section 188 implementation, and we'll continue to work with EO officers around the country. You know, from the state perspective, what are the big challenges that you're having? And I'm interested in what is going to what's the picture going to look like in the future as we begin to see the performance reporting and really begin to look at metrics on the performance measures as in WIOA. So that's probably a lot of questions all bundled together, but you can pick any one of them, I guess.
Well, I think I think I want to start off not talking in terms of challenges, but more, you know, I see some amazing things. With equal opportunity, you know, the language in WIOA was it was vastly different. And we have new regulations from DOL for equal opportunity. And then the states are excited. In fact, next week, you know, we're going to be having a state EO conference with U.S. DOL. It's invitation only to this new position at each state for a state EO officer for workforce development. It's a brand new requirement, which was put in by U.S. DOL. We're excited about it. And, you know, it really gives the states the support and focus they need to do their job. So it's been an elevated position. The states are really excited to have a higher stature for that function. So I think that is a big change. The other area that is really, it is a challenge, but it is the opportunity, is that states are having different agencies work together like never before within the state structure. So the work, you know, unemployment insurance for many years has kind of been off in its own little silo. And we see an amazing thing happening across the country of bringing unemployment insurance along with the other workforce programs, especially with the reemployment and eligibility assessment. It's called REFEA, which is an expanded unemployment insurance grant that allows some individuals who are receiving unemployment insurance to get extra help in the AJCs. And this has bipartisan support. We've got a little bit of, you know, we've had some more funding from that. And it's really making unemployment insurance it's really become reemployment integrated much more closely with the AJCs. So I think that is very exciting.
Thank you. And Diane, you're newest to your job, but from your work in the last couple of months and from talking with NAWDP members, are there particular areas that are kind of rising up that you'd want to mention?
Well, again, I will say that anything I say here is probably, you know, not thoroughly reflective of my membership as a whole, but we had Christine Quinn come and speak at the Youth Development Symposium about the improvements that have been happening in youth programs under WIOA and how well the workforce system has responded to some of the new emphases within WIOA. So, I mean, I think the membership is responding to the requirements, but what I probably hear most regularly, certainly from the board, is an emphasis on business services and how do we better connect and serve businesses. And I think that's going to continue to be a focus moving forward. Obviously, as Chris said earlier, NAWDP's a little bit about where the rubber meets the road, and so everybody's individual experience is just that, an individual experience, and what does their community need and how does that all match up. But business services is are the words of the day, and we'll continue to figure out how to connect the workforce silo with the business silo and make sure that job seekers and businesses are both getting what they need.
Great, thank you. I think all three of you mentioned you'd love to interact more. Some of the centers that have been on, of course, have talked about that. We have spoken at your conferences and have interacted with committees and things like that. What we will try to do is put together a good list, and maybe we'll do a follow-up to this call to make sure that we do have the names of all the centers and the individuals who were on, so that there can be an exchange. An early slide in the PowerPoint did have the email addresses for Julie, Diane, and Ron. And
we'll send out the slide deck to everyone who's on the distribution list, so you'll get copies of that.
Okay. In the 1 or 2 minutes that we have left, I do want to ask the centers that are on whether you have ideas for future meeting topics. We'll do another one later in 2018. And if you have thoughts on speaker or speakers, please let us know. We'll do that as a follow-up as well to this call. I do want to express my appreciation to Julie, Diane, and Ron for making the time today. I think everyone has a much better idea of what each of your organization's mission is, the kinds of activities you're involved with, what you're looking ahead to accomplish in 2018, and it should lead to a great deal more of interaction. I do want to turn back to Chris Button, who is the lead for the systems team that the LEAD Center works with, whether you have some further closing remarks.
No, Michael, just that this has been such a great conversation today. I learned so much. I mean, we have worked with each of your organizations, Julie and Diane and Ron, and yet I still learned a lot today. And we had our phones on mute, but I was just kind of throwing out ideas, as were other people here at ODEP, about ways that we might craft some future partnerships with these really important intermediaries. So thank you so much for being here today. both to Julie, Diane, and Ron, and also to all the centers who took the time to be here. Coordination and non-duplication is so, so important for all of us. We can collaborate with each other and produce better results, and that's what we need to be about. So Mike, finally, I'm happy to hear that you're planning to do a follow-up with names and information so that people can be more formal in sharing information and perhaps collaborating around various initiatives. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you again to all the centers who joined. I think we're just about out of time. I hope you feel as well that you learned a great deal more about these three important organizations and also about resources and activities that some of the centers are involved in. And I hope when we pull together the list that there'll be even more coordination and collaboration. So thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll be following up with you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.